Well, thank you guys for coming and joining us tonight. I apologize that we're starting about 4 minutes later than anticipated, but we're here now. I want to take a second to thank all of our beautiful attendees that came and joined us. Thank you guys for being here. We do this for you guys, and also wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsors, especially the University of Oklahoma, who's allowed us to use their venue, as well as Deep Fork Technologies and True North Ventures. And last but not least, Brecker Media. Thank you guys, and Dennis Spielman and Uncovering Oklahoma. So you guys help us get better and putting these on, and we're very thankful for you guys to partner with us. And I spent last time talking a little bit about a purpose of why we're doing this, and I'm not going to repeat the whole thing, but just to paraphrase a couple things, that Oklahoma City really offers a lot of things for people to do here, including co-working spaces, accelerators, resources, and other types of things. And we really see that Startup Grind is going to be a conduit for these different resources to nurture each other, and a platform for people to have these discussions and collisions with each other. And our goal here is to really get these stories about our founders and our CEOs out there, to talk about what things worked for them, what things didn't work for them, so that you guys can maybe have an easier road down that path. And we want to let people know that Oklahoma City is really here, and there's a lot of stuff going on, because I feel like, the people that we are, we're a nose to the grindstone culture, and we don't really talk about ourselves enough. So this is us talking about ourselves. And with that being said, go ahead and put your hands together for John Yarbor. Excuse me.
Thanks, it's a pleasure to be here.
John, we're extremely happy to have you here. John is the CEO and president and co-founder of Nodecraft. Is that right?
It was not enough titles. I need more titles than that.
He's also the designer. He's also the developer, and
it's on the second page.
Yeah, this is his CV we have here. No, so John's self-taught software engineer, systems architect. We cover the designer part, and for the last decade, he's been working on a bunch of different projects, from small business projects to government contracts, and co-founded Nodecraft 6 years ago, which has grown to be a top 5 multiplayer server hosting company for popular games such as Minecraft. And he's also done some great charitable stuff, and this is where Jonathan and I met. He's served on the local nonprofit Techlahoma board and helped accelerate Oklahoma's technology growth through that, as well as he's really working on bringing a bunch of people together. And I want to give a quick little shout out to a new website that you've been working on that's been a great resource for a lot of local entrepreneurs. Before we dive into your background, what is the name of that again?
It's happeningok.com, as in what's happening in Oklahoma.
Yeah, so you can go on to happeningok.com and find a bunch of these resources that we'll be discussing, and find ways and other things like Startup Grind that you guys can do to get plugged into the community. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into your background. John, tell us a little bit about growing up. You and I had some conversations before this, and you talked about how your father had quite a bit of an influence on your entrepreneurial track.
So really, I think my parents are almost to blame for all of my entrepreneurial path, honestly. But I grew up with just my father. My mother passed when I was 6 in a car wreck. But growing up with my dad, he was probably the best entrepreneurial mentor and coach you could ever get. He had one of the first computer and software shops here in Oklahoma City called Secondhand Software. He ran for almost 15 years until he just honestly got bored. And so he started another company, a comic book shop in Yukon, and all the way to he was one of the first few users of eBay. I remember the early days of we'd go around to thrift shops and we'd grab stuff on the shelf we're gonna sell on eBay. We had a code name we're getting this for our aunt, wink wink, to sell on there. But he really showed me what you could do as an entrepreneur, as someone that just needs to make sure stuff happens. And as much as I would have liked to know my mother, she really kind of gave me a purpose, and understanding that life's short and you've got to really make something of it. So between the two of those, I felt like I've always been really driven and given a prime example of what an entrepreneur can look like. But from an early age, I've always been an entrepreneur. So I mean, like the prototypical suburban entrepreneur is what a lawn business, right? I remember my 13th birthday, I bought a lawnmower from my uncle and told my dad, I'm gonna go get a client. He's like, it's 6 o'clock. How are you gonna get someone right now? Like, no one's gonna do this. And I was like, Dad, forget that. Like, so going and trolling all the lawns that are like 2 feet high now. They should have mowed like 2 weeks ago. But I got my first client first day. And so, I mean, this is kind of a strong theme you'll find. Another example of that was a little later in my life, about 15. I was telling my dad I wanted to do something on the computer. He goes, you can't just learn how to do this on your own. You got to go to college. You got to go have someone help you learn how to do this. And again, it's like, as I got older, I realized that was kind of a challenge. He knew what he was doing. He knew how to activate me and really kind of get me going on this path. But that's really, that's the early days. That led into me doing more computer stuff. I actually made websites for local people here in Oklahoma City as early as 15. My dad would literally drop me off for a client meeting, which is kind of hilarious. Being in high school, everybody else is doing all the things that super high schoolers do. I'm just nose to the grindstone, which again I kind of still attribute to my mother. I grew up really early, and it's given me a purpose. Yeah, does that kind of give you the good intro?
Yeah, that's a good intro. I appreciate you sharing that. You mentioned a little bit about kind of this education by trial by fire. Is that your formal background? Is just jumping into it? Do you have any other educational experiences, or are you one of these went straight into it, the entrepreneurial scene?
No, yeah, it's definitely trial by fire. I had an amazing, great first client that was working on a physical product, and she was incredibly, easy to work with. On her end, she was getting an incredibly cheap website, so, it is what it is. But she was really patient and helped work with me and helped me understand how to actually, what's an invoice? That's how I get paid? That's weird, starting with some of those early things.
That's great, yeah. So around 15, you started poking around on the computer, maybe out of angst, and this became a bit of a hobby and then turned a bit more into a job for you, right?
Well, it was how I got around the limitations my dad would put on the computer. He was like, you can only be on the computer for 1 hour today. And I'd be like, but I'm making stuff. Look at what I've made. I've made this website. And so I'd make these websites, and eventually like my own game in the browser that had thousands of users playing it. But I did this because it combined what was really kind of a hobby. So gaming is what I've been always intensely interested in. And so I took that and turned it into something productive, which is, I made websites for different gaming groups, made it eventually again the application that was like the game itself. And really it was just taking what hobbies I had and making them work, and it wasn't really work at that point.
And so were these hobbies and not work what led you to Nodecraft, or how did you arrive there?
So in between doing all this client work, I always found myself procrastinating a little bit more than I should on the gaming side of stuff. And it wasn't always like I'm procrastinating because I'm playing video games. And that was never the issue. I would sometimes procrastinate on other development or tech projects that were augmenting gaming. So I'd make tools for running different servers or helping communities operate a little more efficiently. So like a tool to help look up a player or do something like that. And I constantly found myself reinventing the same tools. And then I eventually met my co-founder, James Ross, who has been with me in Nodecraft for the last 6 years. And he's over in London. And the reality is that we create all these tools to make doing effectively our job of running these game servers and these gaming communities. And we realized that it was kind of like a suite of things we could sell. We could actually make money off this. And to give you a better idea of exactly how problematic the whole thing that Nodecraft's solving, my business partner James bought a server in New York, had it shipped to Chicago, and then some guy in Chicago racked it in a data center. All the while he's in the UK, he doesn't travel there and oversee this at all. He just kind of expects it to happen. And so he's managing this server, this computer remotely, and that was the better setup compared to companies that operate in our space. It was more reliable, he had more control over the hardware, cheaper, all these things that we were looking for. So I mean, he was the first guy I spoke to. I was like, hey, there's this thing called Minecraft. It's kind of blowing up right now. We've made all these tools. We should just sell these. Like we could just make a company out of this, and for now it could be for fun. And honestly, for the first about year and a half, it was really just a for fun project. It wasn't something we were hell bent on making a ton of money on. It was something that we were just kind of building for the fun of it because we wanted to.
What was it like having a co-founder in a way different time zone?
So I'm really fortunate that he already kind of operated on our time zone to some degree. So he liked being a night owl. He's kind of the developer archetype. So he loves being up until like 4 in the morning. So it's actually not that hard until you want to do stuff that's more businessy. So you have to like actually wake up, at would be our 3 in the morning to get up and do something. So that's like the only real irritation. That, and of course anything tax or baking related has always been a huge hassle. Like it's basically like, cool, when do you want to buy the plane ticket? Because that's what it's going to take.
That's great. And then so Nodecraft was a concept out of an MVP to solve a problem that you had and that obviously other people were having, and it started off as just a hobby, and from there it just really, what was it when you realized that this is more than just a fun hobby and a fun business, and this is going to be more of a for-profit business? This is something that we're really going to run with.
So, when we had just started, Minecraft was not yet what I call the golden age. It was just starting, but like right about 3 or 4 months after we had started, it started really peaking and having a substantial player base. This was about a year before Microsoft bought it, about a year and a half maybe. And so we were kind of riding that wave of Minecraft taking off into like very mainstream in the news every week kind of situation. And because of that, we were able to run a profitable business from day one, which I know is not exactly easy, especially when you're starting up on a bootstrap budget like we did. We started the company with like literally like $500. And so we used Minecraft as this way to just kind of be the catalyst for how we build the company and how we actually were able to fund ourselves. And so there kind of came this pivotal time where we were looking at what's going on. It's like, we're not able to pay ourselves yet, but we're like, it's close to doing it. And we should just quit our day jobs. We should just literally stop everything we're doing and go full time. Because I think if we would literally take that dedication of being able to be here 24/7, we could turn that profit enough to actually go full time. And within 2 months, we were there. So it just took 2 uncomfortable months to actually be able to do this full time.
That's incredible. So where did you go to learn this business experience and try to formulate your business models to make a go at it?
Yeah, we did. So it was definitely, it's one of those things where you learn by just trial by fire, right? So
yeah.
we'd run into people that would actually be, very helpful, give you a lot of tips. And, in the early days, there wasn't a whole lot of that here in Oklahoma City. It was kind of, you might run into a lawyer or somebody that would be able to help you with these things if you could afford it. But we just had to learn by, talking to folks honestly, in the early days, it was just figuring it out on our own. And only until, recently did we actually have a mentor that seriously helped us kind of understand where we needed to head in terms of what we're doing. The mistakes he's already made kind of help us prevent the death by more paper cuts. Just, saying, hey, avoid that, don't do this, or, the obvious thing that he knows, and you're like, what are you talking about? That's never going to happen. And then, you talk to someone else and you're like, no, that's literally going to happen. Just you haven't got there yet.
So you said the mistake word, and just want to dive into that a little bit more. What were some of the mistakes that you might have had or did have, or failures that you might have experienced that you would like to share with us, and maybe things that you've learned from that so that we can try to fail less?
So I think there's a couple things I want to talk about here. Number one is, before Nodecraft, I never really had a business that was bigger than just myself. I was a solo entrepreneur, which means you wear all the hats. And so when you fail, you do all the failing yourself, by the way. There's no one to really, help you out. Maybe you got a spouse and that's great, but I mean, it still doesn't help you make sure the bills get paid, because they're gonna be there every month if you make it or not. And so being able to have a partner, a business partner, truly someone that you can kind of lean upon is something I didn't really understand when I was a solo entrepreneur. I thought I could just do it all. And just being able to step away from things is such a huge win when you haven't had that experience beforehand. So, I mean, just learning, how to work with somebody else, of course, and share that ownership is really difficult. And then second to that is just, building something that's bigger than yourself. So I remember our first employee we got at Nodecraft, for example, it was not a good deal because we didn't know how to work with an employee. I mean, we had an HR guy help us set policy, but policy is not culture. It's not all the things that actually makes human beings want to work together and work well together, right? And so we came into this as two very, very focused folks that have, pouring everything into this business. And our first employee, he's just an employee. He does not things are as on the hook for him. He's just here to do a job. And so I don't fault him by at all. It's just like we were expecting so much more and then expecting him to be as, productive as we are. And the reality is people are all different, right? You might be incredibly productive. Somebody else might be slower because of whatever they're working on. And just having to internalize how that works and creating that kind of flow of understanding, like, yeah, it may take them a while, but when they're done, holy crap, they can do amazing work, right? And just understanding how other people work is definitely one of the hardest things that you can kind of, but for us, it was hardest to really kind of come to grips with, really.
Yeah, I can see that giving up control is also tough, but also there's part of you that's also wanting to give that up so that you can focus more on some of the strategy and some of the other things that you're working on. How did you teach yourself how to do that? How did you, when you brought on this first employee, or I guess you had a co-founder in London at first, but then you had more of a local shop. How did you acclimate to this? How did you learn? How did you teach yourself on how to work with this new employee?
So, I mean, I'm definitely one of the first. I'm very prideful, so I oftentimes won't come to people for help until there's a literal fire. And it's like, okay, I need help put this out. But again, having that mentor was really, really pivotal to helping us understand where to head next. But also just, getting more of the startup culture and more of the building business culture you can find on podcasts or just traveling, talking to folks, or anybody local here as well. But just really kind of learning from other people's mistakes first and foremost before making them yourself, because that's really the best way to do this, and that's how I've learned most of my skills in the first place, is just kind of internalizing the way other people operate and learning from their mistakes.
That's great. So is Nodecraft what it is today the same Nodecraft that you set out to create in the beginning? Or have you had any pivots along the way? Or
So that's a good point, because I actually haven't exactly said what Nodecraft does. So the couple people in here are like, yeah, I know what Nodecraft is. So Nodecraft is it's a cloud platform that enables online multiplayer for esports tournaments, game developers, or direct consumers. And what that effectively means is that if you want to play games with your friends, you have to have this backbone infrastructure that connects you to your friend and makes it all work. It's incredibly technical. We have a product that makes that really easy for anybody to do. And for game developers or esports tournaments, we can do it at scale. That's the important part. And so when we started this, it was just direct to consumer. It's just like, hey, you want to play Minecraft with your friends? We make it really easy to do. And now you want to play these 20 games we offer, it's really easy to do. And for game developers, it means they can actually take care of all the online multiplayer stuff when they launch their game from day one, rather than having to build it out themselves or have to figure out what it means to even start down that road. And so when we started this was just small, scratching our own itch. So it's definitely taken some iterations to get where we are now, but it's all basically been the same mission of just making online multiplayer and gaming easier to do with your friends.
That's wonderful. So you're still accomplishing the same vision that you set out with. Maybe it's narrowed a little bit more. Maybe you're a little bit more focused on what exactly you're carving out in that niche. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I mean, it's the same thing. Just what we really realized is that the landscape for how gaming happens, even 6 years ago, has drastically changed. When you look at the news, you hear Fortnite all the time, right? Everybody knows about Fortnite. Everybody's shaking their head. It's a great example of what can happen when things are just easier to do with your friends. You don't have to go think about it. You don't have to go figure stuff out. You just click play and you're playing with your friends. And that's what we're really trying to bring other games into that direction. Because if you're a game developer, for example, to do this, you have to go build it all yourself. You have to pay for it all yourself. So the part that Fortnite didn't talk about is they spend literally millions of dollars buying cloud servers to make this happen. And if you're an indie developer, you're not probably going to have that bank of cash just sitting around. So one of the things we're really, really excited about right now is a platform that takes our entire product and, right now it's in the browser, so the gamer has to jump from in-game to the browser, figure out how to set it up, and then go back to the game and play with their friends, to making that just a single experience directly in the game, like Fortnite does, for example, but actually making it more of a profit model for the game developer so they can launch their game with a revenue source, a recurring revenue source built in.
So we know that Nodecraft is essentially for gamers by gamers. How do you guys, other than being gamers yourself, source your product ideas and your business model for how to target your customers? How do you guys decide what to do next, your product iterations? Is that something you come up with yourself, or do you source that from some of your customers?
So it's definitely a mix. So thankfully there's a lot of open source data out there for what people are playing, who's streaming this on YouTube or Twitch, which is a platform you can just broadcast, hey, I'm playing Minecraft right now, watch me play Minecraft. But there's a lot of data around what people are watching and what people are playing. So we use that basically as our thesis for what we should attack next in terms of what games we want to cover. From there, we also take a lot of feedback from our customers. Something we learned really early on is our customers are very vocal. It's direct to consumer, so they love to tell you what's wrong or how they'd like to see things happen. And we've actually set up this voting system that works a little bit like Reddit does, for example, so you can upvote or downvote issues. And we've found that this is really critical to understanding, what the actual whole cohort or maybe cohorts of our customer base will want. And that actually empowers us to make those decisions, very early on, rather than just going, well, I feel like it's this, because I do, I play FPS games, or one of my employees were like, well, I play this other game, and I'm telling you you're wrong. And we can just actually point at facts instead of just gut feelings at the end of the day.
That's great. That's great. So is there any other advice that you wish that you could have given yourself when you were starting back 6 years ago on Nodecraft? Anything that you would do differently? Anything that our attendees tonight here can learn from your grind? So
the thing I wish I did earlier on was think bigger. And this is something that I feel like is indicative of a lot of Oklahoma folks that are very, very, nose to the grindstone, is they only think on what they can tangibly see in front of them today, or they know they're building on for literally tomorrow, so they'll only pitch that because they know that's exactly what it's real. They don't want to sell you on something that could be, and I don't know if it's this humble pride that we have here in Oklahoma or not, but I definitely had that at the worst possible capacity years ago, to the point that I missed a huge opportunity to grow the company earlier that I could with actual investments and funding, that I just was like, oh, well, the platform's not there yet. It's not built yet. I can't grow what's not built. And so I walked away from it. And it's something that I really deeply regret, because it was an opportunity to work with someone that had made games that I played as a kid, for example. Mm. And I just didn't recognize that was what the opportunity was. And that it's not about what you have today, it's about how you can work to get there, and how you do so is the most important part.
What is this process like now? What is it like to be on the trail looking for people to help you make this hyper growth?
So it's incredibly exhausting, for one, because you have to take all of your attention that was beforehand on your business, making sure your customers are happy, making sure that you're still growing, and you have to take most of that and just divert it to relationship building with folks that know very little, or they understand a part of your industry. And so it's so time consuming. That's the only part that really is not ideal about it. The other thing is that here in Oklahoma, we're kind of at a disadvantage, especially to places on the coast where funds are just readily available all over the place. So you kind of have to fight for local resources if you stay local. So we're kind of taking the strategy of going outside of the state, which has been awesome so far. But it's definitely not the easiest route or the most affordable route for some people. You spend a lot of time in airports and a lot of time in hotel rooms. But to go back to your other part of your question, the Thunder Launchpad was a fantastic experience. And the entire time I've been an entrepreneur, I've always looked for some kind of resource to kind of just help me navigate those early parts. Because I messed a lot up, early on. I think we were literally in business for a couple months before we even formed an LLC. Basic stuff that most business people are just like, that's obvious, you should just do this. So it was a lot of things like that that I was looking for something to help me understand what the next steps were. But the folks at the Thunder Launchpad are this incredible give first mentality. They're very wholesome about everything they do. They're like totally dedicated to you, to the point it's like, when do you sleep? Like, when do you actually ever think about yourself? Because they have like 10 companies at a time they're working with, and you feel like you're the only company that's going through the process every time you talk to them.
That's a nice touch. That really is. So over the last 6 years, you've had your trials, your tribulations, you've had your wins. Looking back at these, what's helped you continue this struggle? What keeps you pushing forward, and what's the future look like?
So the thing that keeps us going, I think more than a lot, is that we're really critical creators at the end of the day. Like, we have an amazing product team, especially today. And so anytime people use your product, it's always this empowering thing that because when you're making it, you don't have anybody supporting, no one's invested in what you've done, so you know what you've done, but nobody else has. When you start actually getting a crowd of folks that are like vehemently excited about everything you do, it's such an empowering thing that it's hard to describe. Because it's just like you're gonna let somebody down, and it's not just like an individual, it's like crowds of people. So when you do something wrong, they let you know, but when you do something right, they also let you know, and it's very, very empowering. But the other part of that, you asked where's it headed next. So I kind of alluded to that a little bit about heading towards the game developer side of things, the esports side of things. But that's really just us operating at scale. That's us adding more folks, hiring more folks here in Oklahoma City, and continuing to really grow the company out.
So you said the next magic word, Oklahoma City, and I know that we have a few things that you'd like to talk about regarding Oklahoma City's local entrepreneurial system and our ecosystem, as people call it. What has been your experience like having a company and growing it in Oklahoma City, especially since you've had some exposure to what it's like looking for capital outside of Oklahoma City? What are some of the pros and cons? Where can we get better? What's been good to you here?
So, like I said, in my early formative days, there wasn't a lot of resources, where today it's kind of quite the opposite. There are a ton of different launchpad-like entities. There's co-working spaces. There's a lot of ways to actually dive straight into the culture of building your own business. And it's much more obtainable today than it used to be. So that I'm a little jealous, to be honest with you. But I mean, at the same time, it's really, really awesome to see this happening in Oklahoma City. Because to be honest with you, years ago, I never would have expected this to happen, and I was honestly planning to leave, and I was trying to find where the hell I would go next. And so it's really kind of awesome to see this, because now I no longer feel like I have to move, but it's now a thing of like, what can I do to help make sure this does happen? Because the reality is, we're not really there yet. I mean, like we've got a lot of things really, really, in our favor, and we've got a lot of opportunities to really make something exciting out of Oklahoma City. But like, at the end of the day, like, it's not about funding. Like, funding is the nice part. Wouldn't it be nice if? But that's not something I think the majority of people in the room or anybody watching this can actually solve today. But I kind of have a laundry list of things. Can I grab my notes for a second here from you?
Yeah.
But I got this laundry list of things that have just been like nagging me. Like when I talk to more folks, it's right there on the top. I didn't see it. But like, number one, I feel like it's kind of crazy that like people use geography as this like crazy excuse not to go to things. Like, anybody in LA or any other big city would just kind of laugh at us. It's like, how long does it take you to go to Tulsa? An hour and 15 minutes? That's cool. Like, I was in traffic literally going home. It took me an hour and 30 minutes. And you can't just do that for a business venture? Like,
yeah, and they're only driving 7 miles.
Right. And so it's like, they wouldn't take us seriously if we told them that, by the way. So it just kind of drives me nuts that like we exclude Tulsa for the same reasons, or Norman to Edmond, and these things happen all the time. And what it basically means is the right people to come out to these events and speak don't always come out and experience what they need to experience.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject there real quick. There is, speaking of Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and the recent mentioning of the Thunder Launchpad, there was a really interesting article recently about how Erica, one of the Thunder Launchpad co-founders, she was hosting a panel between Oklahoma City's Mayor Holt and Tulsa's Mayor Bynum, and they were talking a lot about how we can really use our neighboring cities to kind of build off of each other, how the Oklahoma City Thunder is helping Tulsa, it's bringing additional bodies into Tulsa and creating jobs over there, creating more desirable workplace for people to come from out of state. And there's also similar things from Tulsa that are creating wins for us here in Oklahoma City. I didn't have anything anywhere I was going with that, but I just want to reiterate to your point that, yeah, like this is a win. This is not necessarily a competition for the two cities. This is something that I think a lot of people can benefit from.
Yeah, and that event was actually really awesome because they had about 30 entrepreneurs they invited as well to help come talk to the mayors. So they were actually listening to the founders themselves, which is not something you really find a lot, especially in these developing ecosystems. So that's really, really encouraging to see. And again, having Eric at the Thunder Launchpad lead that is, again, more indicative of what they're trying to do. Because at the end of the day, they're so focused on, again, making Oklahoma happen the way it needs to, rather than just what serves themselves first.
What else does Oklahoma need to do to take ourselves to the next level?
So I like how you mentioned the fact that a lot of people like to pit Oklahoma City and Tulsa against each other. And I see this happen all the time between companies here that might be in the same space, where they see it as kind of a competitive thing. You got to beat up the local competition. And the reality is, from my perspective, what happens a lot of times is you have two companies spend a lot of energy fighting each other for local resources or for local customer bases, and the winner gets to, basically own this area, sure, but like what's next for them? They then have to take on the world, and they've already taken on all of this immense, time and energy into fighting for these local resources, which means that when they want to leave Oklahoma City and expand, they're kind of already spent a lot here. So it's kind of put them at a disadvantage. And so like what I'd rather see people do is find ways to collaborate more. Because at the end of the day, like we should be able to work with each other much easier than fighting each other. Because again, there are a lot more resources to be had outside of this state, outside of this region, but we can't do it if we're just fighting ourselves first, right? It's gonna lock up a lot of time.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few things earlier about how when you were first starting out, there weren't a whole lot of resources available to you. Now there is a plethora or a myriad of resources. It seems that those are still trying to find a way to work together. There's probably still a few holes there. What other types of resources do we need here? What types of things? I spoke with one of our attendees earlier with OK Sessions, and Christian was talking about how really creating this music scene is something that will also help generate more talent coming to Oklahoma City, and how it's just another complement for what we have with the Thunder, what we have with the great quality of life and low cost of living here. What other types of resources do you think that we need here to really create this synergistic product that really drives our entrepreneurial ecosystem?
So the short answer is diversity, right? So I mean, like at the end of the day, if there was any sort of problem with oil or energy, we would have a huge collapse of our local ecosystem, right? Just financially speaking. So just honestly, at the end of the day, anything, music or tech or whatever it is. So it's a pretty broad question otherwise, looking at this. But I kind of want to take a moment to kind of celebrate what we do have, right? Because I mean, at the end of the day, organizations like Techlahoma, yes, I would serve time on the board, so maybe take this with a grain of salt and realize
Shameless plug.
You're right.
but in reality, they do a lot of good things for the state of technology in the state of Oklahoma.
No, I actually think they're responsible for a lot of the renaissance we've had in technology here, that went from just a few folks, a couple companies doing their own thing, to actually an organized
Fun Plains. Yeah.
Right, and they've actually hosted like 3 different conferences every year now.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to look at the stats on this, but I think there's a good correlation between the decrease in brain drain, where people are just going to Austin, going to Dallas or Denver just to find a job they're interested in. It's happening significantly less now, and I think a lot of that comes from the networking, but also the education you get from Techlahoma events. It's kind of this is a cool place to live because of, rather than I'm leaving this because there's nothing for me.
Yeah, a lot of their members have donated a lot of their time and resources to putting on really cool things like code camps and even a lot of free resources for people to learn how to program, people to improve and hone their skills. And yeah, they've done a lot of great things. What other stuff can Oklahoma City and our local scene do to help new entrepreneurs get more plugged in and feel safe about taking that jump?
So I think a lot of it's cultural. So a lot of what our culture is today is very safe. And I'm going to say conservative, not from a political, like leaning left, leaning right kind of way, but just conservative for what's going to work for us. So a lot of people have to make financial decisions because of their family. And I'm not saying go risk that. But a lot of our mentality is that it won't work and it's going to have this massive crash which is going to end my life. I don't mean like literally, but it's just going to feel like the end of my life, right? And I certainly was there when I started, and it's something that I think a lot of people need to see more people taking that leap of faith, and you know, some people are going to crash, and maybe defining what that crash looks like for you might be a better idea, because at the end of the day, it's usually not as bad as you think it is. It's not fun, but it's usually not just this horrible event that. So I kind of steal it from like Stoicism, for example, where it's just define your biggest failure, what it could actually be, so you can stop thinking about how bad it could be, right? Like, oh, what if it's this? What if it's this? Just define it and, you know, move on.
Yeah, we also had an attendee in the audience that talked a lot about mindfulness, and for that, part of what that means to me is kind of visualizing ahead of your path, and maybe, yeah, it's more than likely that entrepreneurs are going to experience failures, but you know, what is the saying? Fail quick, fail often. So I think it's probably good for us to have that mental toughness and mental strength and cognitive fitness, where we're able to really kind of foreshadow and foresee these things, so that we can you know, stumble a little bit less, or kind of be prepared to pick ourselves back up when we get knocked down.
Right, and that's the most important thing, is you learn how to fail like you learn how to ride a bike. You learn how to, you know, fall. You don't learn how to fall in a way that doesn't hurt yourself, but you also learn how to get back up much faster or much more safer, you know, so you're not laying in the middle of the road, for example, in my analogy here. But the more experience you get to learn that you fail a lot, and it depends on how well you can get back up more than anything else.
What's helped you pick yourself back up?
Having a team that's really there for you, like having a team that you can actually like depend on to be there, because at the end of the day, being able to like step away and deal with, you know, a personal issue, or sometimes you've got to go deal with an investor, for example, and it's just got to be done, and the business has to move on. It has to keep doing what it does. It has to keep operating, and having that team to make sure that, you know, they're there for you is so critical.
What can us solopreneurs do that don't have a team to depend on to help make ourselves a little bit more mentally tough and a little bit more insulated from some of these failures?
So, I mean, that's tough. It's going to vary person to person. But the thing that I would recommend you do more than anything else is get uncomfortable and go talk to more people. Go network. Go find people, because you are not alone. You've got a co-founder. You've got someone that wants to join in on, because they're maybe doing the same exact thing you're doing today, but you've just got to go find them first. And, you know, maybe not look past, you know, again, to the geography comment, like, maybe he's in another country and you meet him online, right? And or her, sorry. But it's definitely a thing where you got to get yourself out there, and you've got to be uncomfortable, because the entire time you're comfortable, you're not really growing at the end of the day. That's great.
Well, I think we've still got some more time here. If we'd like to open up the floor for some questions or answers. Before we do that, any last parting thoughts before we open up the floor?
So last thing I really want to say is, like, I mentioned a couple of things that we need to improve upon here, but the thing that I did mention is Oklahoma's secret superpower we have. And it's something a lot of people take for granted. You know, when you go to these, like, I just came back from Denver. I was at a startup conference, and I was talking to people, oh, you're from Oklahoma City, and and they make a ton of assumptions the moment they hear Oklahoma. They size up your business, they size up what you're capable of, what your employees are capable of, and that's an opportunity, because the thing I found is that where I have no shortage of incredibly talented people here, incredibly motivated people here in Oklahoma, and you don't find that everywhere. Like, especially in places like Denver, you're the people that are scrounging for anybody that might have these kind of skills, and they're much more readily available here in Oklahoma City, or Oklahoma as a whole. I wouldn't just limit to Oklahoma City. And so that, combined with the low cost of living, combined with the culture of how laid back and really friendly people are here, I mean, that's why you see this a lot of times where people will come here for, they flew through or they had a quick vacation here, and then like a year later they move here. And I was like, oh, we loved it. We just moved over here. And so it's kind of our superpower.
Yeah, we're a destination city now, aren't we?
It didn't used to be that way.
Too soon.
Seriously. But it is becoming that way, though. Seriously, I talked to at least a quarter of the people I spoke to. Oh, I've been there, and it wasn't just because I flew through.
That's great. Well, thank you. That's incredibly encouraging, and we look forward to seeing how Oklahoma City continues to grow. And we're so honored that you've been a part of this growth for us. And has anyone had a chance to think about any questions that they'd like to ask? Yeah, Tommy, we had your hand up.
Can you get a
I
mic?
just want to say thank you. My question is, how do you find the right people with the right sound in the different countries? So don't tell me Facebook, hey, somebody posted, I'm a software engineer, I can do this. So how do you find people? This is the right people who's looking forward working for your company.
And you're definitely welcome. The question was, how do I find people, especially more remote or someone that you don't have direct access to locally? How do you create that first human connection rather than just, basically spamming out, hey, I'm this, I'm looking for this? Because I mean, it kind of comes down to like how online dating works. At the end of the day, you can lie a lot and you can put yourself out there, but it's not really the most efficient way to. You can tell I've been married and with my wife since like high school, so I'm probably not making a good analogy about dating here. Sorry, but it's hard to do. It's like all relationships, but you don't get that personal in-person. Let's go to the bar and just hang out or whatever. That doesn't happen, of course. But the thing that my co-founder and I had was gaming, which was kind of the same thing. It's just digital. So I don't know that I know the answer for how you do this. But I know the thing that we did more than anything else was we had a pre-existing relationship where we worked on stuff. So do something that was unrelated to what became the business. And we realized we had a good relationship early on that worked really well back and forth. And because of that, it made sense to then become business partners. And again, this was my experience. And I don't think it's indicative of everybody's, and it shouldn't be advice, but I'm just letting you know how it worked for us.
That's great. I think I saw Christian had a hand up.
You talked about going from the transition when you all hired your first employee and sort of learning some lessons about how to understand somebody who's not you and probably doesn't have quite the same investment in the venture as you do. So if I'm kind of going down that road for the first time, what's the best way for me to learn that quickly? Do you have any advice to somebody like in your situation, knowing what you knew about how to, as a manager, how to get there?
So I had the benefit of knowing a incredibly talented. Sorry. I should repeat the question. Sorry.
No worries.
So the question was, how did I go from messing up the relationship with my first employee with all the back and forth issues of productivity and expectations because the employee wasn't as invested as I was as a stakeholder. So I had the opportunity to have a really good friend who had just started his own HR consultancy. And he was incredibly talented. He's here in Oklahoma City, by the way, if you're looking for an HR guy. Seriously, I'll hook you up. But he helped us understand not just the policy, but like also the human connection that was missing. We hired him to do the offboarding of the employee, which let the employee say whatever he needed to say and what we needed to hear, rather than being nice to my face, so that the HR guy can then give me a piece of paper going, hey, here's what he really said, and I paraphrased for you so that it was the nicer version of this. And as a result of that, I'm actually good friends with that past employee. There's no skeletons in that closet. We hang out all the time. We play games all the time. But he was pivotal to helping us understand what was missing and the things that we really weren't taking care of. That and there's a book, and I'll have to give it to you afterwards. But one of the co-founders of was Dropbox has a whole book on this subject, and that was incredibly good information to kind of digest. And I'll have to get the name of that. I'm sorry, I'm terrible on names, but it was incredibly helpful to just be able to digest and think about that more, because he went through the same issue and just kind of laid out what happened.
That's great. That's great. Do we have any other questions out there? Ethan?
What's the biggest misconception you've had about business or just the whole business entrepreneurial world? So something that you thought might be a big deal but ended up not being a big deal at all.
So the question was, what was the biggest misconception I had about starting my own business or running my own business? And how was I wrong? I was hoping to stall a little more than that. Actually, I think it was actually directly related to the first time we paid any substantial taxes. I was fearful of it all year long, and this was the first year we went from like just a little bit of revenue to like holy crap revenue. From starting it was definitely the first year of just shock of it happening. I mean, we spent probably 3 months just reeling in the growth of the company, and we just found a CPA who was down the street, and it was just some guy and his wife working, and I'm sure for a lot of folks it'd be great, but it was not helpful at all for us. And so I was like, yeah, here's how much you owe, and it's like, cool, we don't have that money because we've spent it all trying to grow and scale the company. And we didn't have near as much because he just did the bare minimum of what taxes looked like. And so we found the right CPA. They came in and figured out what exactly we needed to do, and it was so much more manageable. And that was the first time I realized, there's this thing called professionals that are really good at what they do, and they're worth their weight in gold. You should always hire them. So that's why we did the HR guy afterwards. I just knew at this point that's what you do. And from that point on, it's been the same thing. It's just they're seriously worth it.
That's great. I think we still have time for a couple more questions.
I have two questions. The first one is, let's say, considering the early years of your business to now, what kept you up at that time and what keeps you up at today? And the second question I have is, from your success, what would you attribute to luck versus your hard work?
Those are great questions.
So your first question, can you repeat your first question one more time? Sorry.
My first question is, let's say considering early years of your business versus today, what kept you up before and what keeps you up today?
What kept you up before in the early years and what keeps you up now with your business? That's question one.
So in the early years of my business, what kept me up most was just the fact that we hadn't built anything. We hadn't built a real platform. It was kind of just stuck together with it's just barely holding itself together. And I remember distinctly having a PagerDuty thing that's set up for anytime our app would go down, anytime problems would happen, and it would happen all the time, 4 a.m, doesn't matter, or you're about to go to dinner, boom, it happens, and it just constantly happened. And the reality is we took those early steps to just get it out and have our own product on the market, which was immensely beneficial because we didn't harbor this product again, like I told you earlier, that we knew we were built and there's nobody using it. We had live users, so we had to spend a lot of time fixing all these issues. And in hindsight, the users didn't care that much. For a few minutes, they're kind of mad it's down, and then it gets back up and they're like, oh, cool, and they don't care anymore. They literally forget. It doesn't matter. So the lesson I learned from that was just, get something out early on. Don't worry that it's perfect. You hear the quote all the time. If you've it's the
if you're not embarrassed from your first release, it's not good.
Right. If you're not embarrassed of your first release, you've released too late, right? And I definitely agree with that. And thanks for having that quote. And so anymore, my worries and that keep me up at night is that we're not moving fast enough. We've got a mature product that we've gone through our second iteration now. It's not something we've built overnight. It's something that's taken years to get to this point. So we have a lot more faith in what the platform itself can do. But it's just like, are we actually getting the market penetration we need? Are we actually moving fast enough that we're going to make a difference, rather than letting somebody else get in our way?
And I think the follow-up question was, how much of your success today do you attribute to luck, and how much of that do you attribute to hard work?
So it's a mix. I mean, it's never one or the other. It's always, it depends on the situation. One of our earliest successes was on not really luck. Well, it's kind of luck, but it's relationships more than anything else. So that pivotal moment where we went from a little bit of revenue to seriously holy cow, we could actually jump on full time. That transition only happened because of a relationship that we established with somebody. We just reached out and said, hey, I love this project. It was this gaming modding project, which basically means you can take Minecraft and add Pokemon to it. So you got Pokemon and Minecraft, which is a really great marriage in gaming, right? So they had this platform, and I was like, hey, if there's anything we can ever do, just let me know. And we just opened an offer, and he was like, yeah, cool, I've already got this other company. It's a competitor of yours. I don't want to step on their toes. But yeah, sure. And I just kept keeping that relationship up. I kept being nice to the guy, giving him something with no expectations of return. And a few months later, he comes back to me and says, man, those other guys, they're jerks. They just anytime I have a problem, they make me feel like the actual perpetrator, not the victim of the problem. And so I can never get anything done. So what can you do? So in 2 weeks, we built the thing that he needed. We stopped everything we're doing for that. But the referrals we got from him alone was that huge spike, more than anything else. So it was kind of luck that the other company wasn't taking care of the relationship, but it was also, you have to plant those seeds in the first place, because you can't just rely on luck in the first place.
Great input. Got one final question?
Yes, great.
Full disclosure, I know John, but I really don't know the answer to this question, which is, between here and when you got started, what's the thing that surprises you the most about how things have turned out so far?
Repeat the question. I need time to think.
What has surprised you the most so far about how things turned out?
What has surprised you the most so far about how things turned out?
Crashed your brain, I'm sorry.
No, it's just I'm trying to think of what that actually would be. But I think the thing that surprises me the most today is the team that we've built and how capable they are. And a lot of this is being able to hand off that workload to somebody else, and actually putting it totally in their hands, and then having something amazing come back that just was way better than you expected it to be, even that you dreamed it to be, is a truly astounding process to go through. That has been the most foundationally shocking and awesome thing about growing the business.
Great. Well, with that being said, Jonathan's going to stand back for a few minutes, and if you guys want to ask him any one-on-one questions offline, he'll be here for a little bit. Again, I want to take the time to thank all of you guys who came out and joined us tonight. I especially want to thank our sponsors again, including OU, Brecker Media, Uncovering Oklahoma, and Dennis. Yeah, you guys are great. If you guys want to get a chance to talk with some of these people, these are really helpful people. They're really great people, and part of what we want Startup Grind to be here is a place for these discussions and collisions to take place, so that you can get exposed to more resources, get exposed to more people like yourselves that are trying to create something, people are looking to build something, and there's a lot of great resources here. So if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, I'd encourage you to jump on board and sign up for that. Our next event is going to be November 13th here with Ken Parker, who has an incredible story about how they took a startup through an IPO, and incredible family man as well too. So it's wonderful to kind of get a touch of how someone can manage growing something so incredibly big with maintaining also a strong family relationship. And if you enjoyed your time here tonight, bring a friend next time. We can probably throw out a promo code or something for that if you want to bring them by. And with that being said, let's give a great round of applause to John John, we really appreciate having you tonight, and your story was really encouraging for us in the Oklahoma City ecosystem. There was a lot of things that you said that I knew that I've learned from just speaking with you tonight, and I'm sure that was something that a lot of our other attendees were able to gather from. I really appreciate the time that you spent with us and all of the tidbits and knowledge that you shared of your experience of growing a business here. So, for John.